I've replayed that night more times than I care to admit, not because it was dramatic or explosive, but because it wasn't. That's what haunts me. It was all too calm. The dining room was dimly lit. Candles, wine, the kind of jazz she puts on when she wants to feel sophisticated. Her version of domestic romance. She wore that navy silk blouse I'd bought her for her birthday 2 years ago, the one she used to save for special dinners. It had been months since she'd worn it. That should have been my first clue. She waited until the plates were cleared, until the wine glasses had been refilled, until my defenses were down. That was always her way, never charging the gate, just letting it fall open on its own. She leaned back in her chair and looked at me as if what she was about to say was reasonable, maybe even overdue. "What would you think?" she began, her tone so light I thought she was joking, "about opening the marriage?" I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was confused. Because I wasn't. Her words were precise, practiced. She didn't stumble. Her eyes didn't flicker. She meant it. "You mean an open marriage?" I said, careful not to let the question land like an accusation. She nodded, slowly, as if trying to read my temperature before pouring more heat. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said. "And reading. We're in a great place, Daniel. Strong. But I feel like we've stopped growing. This could be a way to explore new parts of ourselves. Without breaking anything." That word, explore, landed on me like a wet cloth. Damp, heavy, meant to muffle a scream. I studied her face. There was no mischief, no apology. Just quiet conviction. Like a teacher introducing a difficult but necessary concept. She even smiled when she said it, not wide, not seductive. Almost grateful. I asked her if she was unhappy. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to hear the lie. "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. "This isn't about you. It's about freedom. About choice. You and I were solid. You're my home. This would just be opening the windows. Letting some fresh air in." The language was deliberate. Crafted. She'd workshopped this somewhere, maybe with Chloe, that friend of hers who calls herself a relationship realist. Or maybe online. There are forums for this kind of thing, I'd later learn. I didn't argue. I didn't ask who he was, though I was already certain there was a he. You don't wake up one day and float the idea of extramarital freedom unless your feet are already halfway out the door. Instead, I asked her what she envisioned. I watched her exhale, visibly relieved. She poured more wine, her posture loosening. She explained guidelines, talked about honesty, communication, no secrets. Irony in its purest form. She used words like mutual respect and evolution. She said things like, "I don't want to own you, and I don't want to be owned." It sounded less like a marriage proposal and more like a Silicon Valley contract. Fluid, decentralized, disruptive. I nodded, took it all in. Let her talk. Let her think this was new territory for both of us. But it wasn't. She believed I was calm because I was shocked. That I was silent because I was swallowing pain. But in truth, I wasn't trying to hold myself together. I was watching her, memorizing every inflection, every phrase. Because in that moment, something in me went quiet. Very quiet. And from that silence, a single, undeniable thought formed. She thinks I won't fight. Not the screaming kind of fight. Not begging. Not bargaining. Something colder. Smarter. She had just opened the first move in a game she didn't realize she was playing. And I wasn't going to stop her. I was going to let her make every move she wanted. Because eventually, she'd step into a position she couldn't defend. And when that moment came, I'd be ready. You don't notice how much someone controls the air in a room until they stop pretending it's shared. After that dinner, after her calm little proposal, things didn't explode. They spread. Quietly. Like oil on water. The following days were smooth. Too smooth. She acted almost lighter, like a burden had been lifted. And in a way, I suppose it had. She'd set her plan in motion, and I hadn't resisted. To her, that meant she'd won. She began defining our new dynamic, as she called it, with the confidence of someone who'd already been living it. "Discretion is important," she said, standing barefoot in the hallway, her hair twisted up in that casual way she does when she's preparing for bed. "We should avoid involving anyone we both know." I nodded. "No coworkers. No mutual friends. No family." Another nod. "I just think we should keep this clean, controlled." I watched her outline these rules like a policy memo. And I wondered, was this to protect me? Or to protect the illusion? Her illusion. She didn't ask about my boundaries. She didn't ask who I might see. She didn't even pretend to care. Because to her, this wasn't about fairness, it was about clearance. And as I let her talk, something small inside me settled. Not anger, not sorrow. A seed, cold, patient, and entirely awake. That week, she went out more. Nothing excessive, she was far too careful for that. A new gallery opening on Thursday. Drinks with Chloe on Sunday. A self-care retreat Saturday afternoon. I never questioned it. Never raised a brow. I simply listened. I noticed the details, the ones that always betray the performance. Her careful over-explaining. The way she lingered in the mirror a little longer before leaving. The slight delay when I asked casual questions. The occasional correction when she forgot which version of a story she'd told. But the most telling detail of all? Her confidence. It wasn't the confidence of someone testing something. It was the comfort of someone who believed she was 2 steps ahead. She started diffusing scented candles again. She hadn't done that in months. I'd almost forgotten the way bergamot filled the hallway, or how she'd hum, always the same tune, while choosing which scent to light. It used to soothe me. Now, it irritated something beneath my skin. One night, as she leaned over the living room table, lighting a sandalwood candle like it was a ritual of self-care, I asked, "Do you feel happier lately?" She smiled. "I feel more like myself." I returned the smile. "Good. That matters." She seemed almost disappointed at my response, as if she'd expected pushback. A challenge. Something to reassert her position. But I gave her none, because I wasn't playing the game she thought we were. She believed we were renegotiating marriage. She thought she had the upper hand because she initiated the change. But change isn't power. Information is. And I was gathering it quietly, like wind curling under a doorframe. She had rules for me. Unspoken expectations. She didn't say it, but I knew she expected me to move carefully, maybe even awkwardly, like a man out of place in this new freedom. She wanted the illusion of balance, with none of the risk. I wasn't supposed to look attractive to anyone else. I wasn't supposed to be wanted, especially not by someone she knew. That was the unspoken rule, and I would never break it. Not directly, but I would let someone else crack it open. And when that happened, I wouldn't stop it. I would watch what she did next and remember. Because watching her shift from control to discomfort would be the first sign that the ground she stood on wasn't hers after all. It started with a glance. Not from my wife, from her friend. The kind of look that doesn't last too long, but lingers in memory just enough to make you wonder if it was meant to. We were at a small house gathering. Casual. Just wine, background music, a few familiar faces. The kind of evening where no one dresses up, but everyone wants to be seen. Lisa was in her element, laughing too loudly, circling the room, always with a drink in hand and a comment at the ready. I kept to the perimeter, as usual. I've never been one to chase a spotlight I didn't earn. I talked with Marcus from work about housing prices, nodded politely through small talk with 2 neighbors whose names I never remember. And then I saw her, Cindy. Cindy was one of those friends my wife insisted I liked more than I actually did. A little too polished, always theatrical. She had divorced 2 years ago and wore that freedom like perfume. Expensive. Excessive. She made her way toward me with a practiced casualness and stood closer than the room required. "You know," she said, swirling her wine, "I always wondered why you didn't speak more." I smiled faintly. Lisa usually fills the air well enough. Her laugh was soft and dry. True. But silence can be interesting, especially when it's deliberate. There was weight behind her words, not flirtation exactly, but invitation. A door not fully open, just cracked wide enough to notice the warmth inside. I didn't step through it. I didn't even lean toward it. But I didn't close it either. That's the difference. Later that evening, I found myself in the kitchen alone, drying my hands on a towel, when Taylor, Lisa's younger sister, brushed past me to grab more wine. She paused. "You really do clean up nice," she said without looking at me. I glanced at her. "You sound surprised." She smirked. "Maybe I am. You've always seemed." Background. "Tonight, you're not." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. When I returned to the living room, Lisa was watching me, glass in hand. Smile tight. Not angry. Not jealous, even. But unsettled. She wasn't used to attention shifting without her directing it. After the guests left, she wandered into the kitchen in silence, still in her dress, barefoot now, one hand tracing the edge of the counter. I was rinsing glasses. "She's always had a thing for married men," Lisa said. No name, but she didn't have to say one. "Who?" I asked lightly. She didn't answer. "I thought that was allowed now," I said just as lightly. "Interest. Exploration. Fresh air." She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just stood there, watching me for a moment too long, then turned and walked upstairs. It was subtle, but it was the first time she didn't feel in control. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I hadn't followed the script she'd written in her head. In her version, I was supposed to hesitate, to stumble into this arrangement like a man walking on unfamiliar ice. I was supposed to stay small, still, but I didn't. I moved through the evening with poise. Quiet, steady. I didn't flirt. I didn't chase. I simply existed with confidence. And that alone was enough to shift something. She had opened the cage. She just hadn't expected the bird to stand so still and still be seen. That night, as I lay beside her, her back turned, her breathing sharp and too even, I realized something important. She had begun this to feel powerful. But power doesn't lie in permission. It lies in perception. And what she had just seen, from her friends, from me, was a new perception forming. One where I was not waiting. One where I could be desired. And she, for the first time, couldn't control it. Control doesn't vanish in an instant. It fractures. Cracks form in the quiet. A missed beat in a conversation. A smile that lasts too long. A glass set down harder than necessary. The day after the gathering, she was quiet. Not cold, not confrontational. Just observant. Like someone trying to reassemble a puzzle that no longer fit the picture she'd memorized. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when she joined me. No greeting, no small talk. "Did you enjoy yourself last night?" she asked casually. Too casually. "It was a good night," I said, sipping slowly. Everyone seemed relaxed. She nodded, staring out the window. "Cindy always flirts too much when she drinks." "Did she?" I asked, without turning. I hadn't noticed. That lie landed gently. Deliberate. Measured. I watched her from the corner of my eye. Her shoulders stiffened, just enough to betray the effort she made to stay composed. "She can be inappropriate," she continued. "She seemed friendly," I said, still watching the coffee swirl in my mug. "You've never had a problem with her before." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked over to the fruit bowl and adjusted an already perfect line of apples. That's how I knew something was off. She only arranged things when she needed to feel centered. "I just think we should be careful," she finally said. About who we let close, who we entertain, especially if things are shifting." There it was. The warning. Dressed as concern. Spoken like advice, but loaded like a weapon. I turned to face her fully, let my voice remain calm. "Isn't that the point of this? Shifting things. Exploring new dynamics." She stared at me, unblinking. "Not at the cost of something meaningful." "Then maybe we should have defined what still counted as meaningful," I replied. That silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of something unspoken and dense. Her gaze flickered, not with regret, not even anger, but calculation. She hadn't expected me to push back. Not with logic, not with composure. She had opened the door, confident she could still guide where I stepped. Now, she was realizing she couldn't. The next few days were colder. Not overtly, but in those quiet, domestic rituals where tension builds without a word. The way she set plates down more sharply. The way she didn't ask about my day. The way her phone rarely left her side now, screen tilted away. I let her be. I kept smiling, kept moving through the house with the same quiet grace that had started to unsettle her. But inwardly, I was watching. Closely. One evening, I saw her on the back patio, speaking on the phone. The way she angled herself, slightly turned, voice lowered, a lightness to her tone that hadn't been meant for me in weeks. It told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't interested in freedom. She was interested in power, hers, not ours. The open marriage was never a bridge, it was a veil. A license to pursue someone she already knew, already wanted. But something had shifted. She'd expected liberation. She hadn't planned on losing her grip on perception, on watching others, including her own friends, redirect their gaze. One night, as we lay in bed, she asked, too softly, "You haven't met anyone, have you?" It wasn't curiosity. It was fear. I turned to face her, kept my voice even. "Isn't that what you wanted?" Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Just a faint breath. A hesitation. That was the flinch. The first break in the mask. And I would not forget it. It wasn't a discovery. Not exactly. It was more like the final click of a lock that had been turning for weeks. A shape coming into focus that had always been there, just beyond the edge of my awareness. It began innocently enough. A message from a former colleague, Matt, someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year. We'd worked together on a consulting project, and though we weren't close, we'd shared enough conversations for him to know Lisa by name. He'd seen us at a charity event once. He remembered her dress. "Hey," the message said. "Weird question. Is Lisa working with Carter Henley now? Thought I saw her in a post from his fundraiser last weekend." Carter Henley. The name rang, but distant, until it snapped into place. A nonprofit attorney, mid-40s, recently divorced. Lisa had mentioned his name once in passing, said he ran a legal workshop she'd attended for personal development. She'd praised his clarity of thought. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. I opened the post Matt mentioned. It was on the event page of a private fundraising group, one Lisa hadn't told me she was attending. The album was public. Dozens of photos, nothing overt, nothing scandalous. Just people smiling, clinking glasses, milling about beneath soft outdoor lighting. I scrolled slowly, and then I saw it. Lisa, standing beside Carter. Not arm in arm. Nothing theatrical, but close. Closer than strangers. His hand rested lightly on her lower back. Her body was angled toward him. Her smile, not the wide one she used for group shots, but the one she used when she felt seen. Genuinely seen. No tags. No captions. No trace of her digital footprint leading to this post. As if it had never happened. But it had. And someone had taken that photo. I saved the image, quietly. Then I scrolled back through our shared calendar. That night had been marked Book Club, hosted by Chloe. I almost laughed. Chloe didn't even own a dining table. I didn't confront Lisa. I didn't ask. That wasn't the game anymore. The truth was no longer hidden. It was simply unspoken. And that distinction changes everything. Instead, I began noticing patterns. Mentions of workshops that didn't align with any actual events I could verify. Gaps between when she left home and when she arrived at the locations she said she'd be. Carefully worded texts about dinners that never left receipts. A scent on her that wasn't mine, but not unfamiliar, just faint enough to make me second guess. The fundraiser had a guest list. I found it online. Carter Henley. Lisa. No Chloe. No mention of any of her usual circles. Her attendance had been deliberate, meant to be invisible. She'd woven her alibi carefully, layering it with names I wouldn't question, times I wouldn't track, and places too vague to follow. But she hadn't counted on someone like Matt, someone peripheral, remembering her face from a year ago. That was the problem with secrets in public. Eventually, someone sees. That night, I looked at the photo again. I stared at the distance between them, at the way she leaned, slightly, toward him. Not romantic, not overt, but familiar, like someone standing in a space they knew well. I didn't feel rage. I felt design. It was clear now, this wasn't a spontaneous spiral. It wasn't new energy or freedom. This had been structured, managed. Lisa had built a story around her affair so layered, so deliberate, it could almost pass for innocence. But innocence doesn't hide itself. Innocence doesn't need cover. From that night on, I began to prepare. I didn't know what my final move would be, not yet. But I knew I was already playing it. And every move she made from here forward would bring her closer to the center of her own unraveling. There are moments that don't feel like revelations, not at first. They come dressed as accidents, offhand comments, small talk made while waiting for water to boil. But later, when the pieces click, you realize the whole structure was there all along. You just needed the angle. It was a Sunday, late morning. Lisa had gone out to clear her head, which lately meant 2 hours at a downtown cafe I had never seen her bring home coffee from. She'd left without asking if I wanted anything. That, too, had become routine. I stayed in, fixing the broken cabinet hinge in the guest bathroom, the kind of chore I used to postpone but now craved. Tasks that kept my hands busy while my mind stayed sharp. Taylor dropped by unannounced. She was always the more spontaneous of the two. Younger by 4 years, she had a quiet way of watching people that reminded me of myself, like she saw more than she let on. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, holding up a box of almond croissants. "And I thought maybe you wouldn't have eaten." I smiled. "Lisa's out." She nodded, unsurprised. She said she's been needing more solo time lately. "I get it. That job of hers can be overwhelming." She said that. Taylor shrugged, placing the box on the counter. "Well, she mentioned it. Kind of in passing. Something about how Carter gives her space to breathe." There it was. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask Carter who. I just turned to grab plates from the cupboard. Let the name settle into the room like steam. Taylor kept speaking, unaware of what she dropped. He sounds intense, she said, pulling apart the pastry. One of those older men who knows exactly what he wants and says it like a challenge. She said it's been refreshing after years of stability. Did she say how they met? I asked. A casual murmur. Taylor paused. Just slightly. Oh, I don't know. Some legal seminar, I think. He runs workshops on mediation or something. Right? I said, handing her a plate. She mentioned that. We ate in silence for a while. A silence that pulsed. I kept my face still, my movements unhurried. But inside, the map shifted. Everything slid into place. Carter wasn't just a name. He was the center. The origin point. The reason she proposed the open marriage. The reason she felt so bold. So certain. She had built the idea of freedom, not as exploration, but as justification. A way to retrofit her betrayal into a story where she could still claim the moral high ground. It was never about searching. It was about protecting what she'd already found. Taylor didn't seem to realize what she'd said. Or maybe she did, and regretted it. After coffee, she lingered by the door. You okay? She asked. Of course, I said. Why wouldn't I be? She gave me a long look. Her expression wasn't concerned. It wasn't sympathetic either. It was curious. The kind of curiosity that comes when someone sees you differently, not broken, but unreadable. You just seem quieter lately. I'm thinking, I said. About what? How well we ever really know someone, I replied. She tilted her head, almost amused. That's heavy for a Sunday. I smiled. Some Sundays call for it. She left soon after. I watched her car pull out of the driveway, then went upstairs, opened my laptop, and returned to the image of Lisa and Carter. I zoomed in, examined the background. Reflections in windows. A framed certificate behind the bar. I traced locations, names, timestamps. Then I searched Carter Henley. Lawyer. Mediator. 2 published papers on relational ethics. Divorced, no children. Charitable speaker for multiple organizations. And 1 confirmed upcoming event, an exclusive roundtable on emotional integrity and conflict resolution. Lisa was already registered. She hadn't mentioned it. Of course she hadn't. This was no longer about suspicion. This was structure, pattern, timing. All of it pointed to one truth. Lisa believed she was in control because she had hidden her foundation behind the illusion of choice. She had made betrayal look like maturity. But every house built on illusion eventually collapses. It just takes pressure in the right place. Now I knew who he was. And I was almost certain what he wanted. But more importantly, I now had something they both lacked. An awareness of what was coming. There's something quietly thrilling about setting a trap no one sees coming. Not because you want to catch someone, but because you want them to catch themselves. To watch, in real time, as all their justifications, distractions, and performances collapse under the weight of their own words. It began with a suggestion, light, easy, almost throwaway. Our neighborhood was organizing a charity evening, something between a fundraiser and a showcase for local causes. Each family or household was encouraged to contribute something personal. A performance, a piece of art, a short speech. Something about connection, generosity, trust. I proposed a video. Lisa lit up immediately. You mean like a family tribute? I nodded. Photos, old footage, moments from our travels. Something honest. Nostalgic. She smiled. She loves being watched, especially when she can control the narrative. That sounds beautiful, she said. Do you need help gathering things? No, I replied. I've already been saving bits here and there. I think I know how I want to tell the story. That wasn't a lie. Over the past month, I'd begun collecting. Not just memories, but movements. Patterns. Fragments of truth buried inside casual messages, behind vague calendar events, inside metadata most people ignore. I hadn't confronted Lisa. I hadn't made accusations. I had observed, as always, silently, patiently. And now, I had what I needed. The video would begin exactly as she expected. Smiling snapshots of us from vacations years ago. Her laughing in a garden. My arm around her on a beach. A birthday cake. A dog we no longer had. It would be slow, warm, almost boring. I needed it that way. It had to lull the room. Lower the temperature. And then, gradually, the tone would shift. A transition into recent photos. A subtle timestamp in the corner. A location tag flickering too quickly for most people to read, but long enough for her to recognize. Then a short clip, nothing dramatic. Just Lisa, on a city sidewalk, smiling as she walks beside Carter. His face slightly turned away, her hand brushing his sleeve. Recorded from across the street. Silent. Unremarkable. But real. Then another. A quiet lobby. Her waiting. He arrives. They embrace, not romantically, but with the familiarity of people who no longer need to hide from themselves. Then still frames, layered like a timeline. Her workshop registration. His seminar schedule. The evening she claimed to be at a friend's apartment, mirrored against a parking receipt 2 blocks from Carter's condo. The final image. The photo from the fundraiser. That small smile. That precise distance. And then, silence. Black screen. No explanation. No narration. Just the story in her own movements. I edited it alone, late into the night. I kept the pacing deliberate. Not cruel, clinical. As if the betrayal was data. As if her choices had simply revealed themselves. When I tested the final cut, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance. Cold and clean. Lisa, meanwhile, continued on cheerful, distracted. Occasionally suspicious, but never directly. She asked once what part of the video she'd be featured in. Around the middle, I said. She laughed. That's appropriate. I've always been the heart of us. I smiled back. Yes, you have. In the days leading up to the event, she became more affectionate. Not physically, but performatively. She started planning what we'd wear. Chose my shirt for me. Coordinated colors. Her voice even took on a higher tone, the one she uses when she wants to appear effortless, breezy. The night before the fundraiser, she turned to me in bed. You seem different, she said. How so? Focused. Like something's coming. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who had rewritten our marriage in the language of permission and exploration. The woman who believed she was guiding this new narrative. Maybe I just feel ready, I said. For what? I paused. For people to finally see us for who we are. She smiled, satisfied. She thought she was winning. She had no idea she'd already stepped onto the stage. The room was full, but the silence was precise, the kind that comes only when everyone is watching the same thing and no one dares to interrupt. The community center had been dressed for the occasion. String lights along the ceiling beams. White tablecloths. Wine and cheap glassware that pretended to be elegant. Neighbors and friends sat scattered across round tables, chatting between sips and polite laughter. The program moved briskly. A local teen played cello. A pair of retirees read a poem about gratitude. Someone's child sang off-key. Then it was our turn. Lisa took my arm as we approached the front. She looked radiant, confident, a woman prepared to be celebrated. She smiled at the room, then at me. I returned it, small, calm. The projector screen lowered. The lights dimmed. And the video began. It opened with warmth. Lisa and me on the Oregon coast, windswept and sunburned. Her birthday dinner 3 years ago. A slow-motion clip of her spinning in a summer dress. Laughter layered over soft piano music. People around us nodded, smiled. Someone whispered, "How beautiful." Lisa leaned slightly against me. Her pride palpable. This was her show. Her story. Then came the newer footage. Her at an outdoor event, waving to someone just out of frame. Our living room, dimly lit, her curled on the sofa, unaware of the phone camera propped silently on the shelf. A faint voice in the background, hers, speaking on the phone. No, he doesn't suspect anything. We're being careful. The audio was subtle, compressed. It wasn't confrontational. It didn't need to be. Then, a transition. A still photo, Lisa standing beside Carter Henley at the fundraiser. The one with no tags, no captions. Just proximity. A low murmur rose in the room. The silence cracked, just slightly. Another clip, short, silent, grainy. A parking lot. Carter exiting his car. Lisa already there, her back turned. They walk in together. Nothing salacious. Just pattern. Familiarity. Then came the voice message, faint, but clear. A saved audio file sent from her phone weeks earlier, never meant to be heard again. I'm telling you, he's too careful. He's not a threat. I know how to manage him. And then black screen. Silence. No explanation. No conclusion. Just the lingering weight of the final words, stretching across the darkened room like fog. Lisa sat frozen beside me. She didn't breathe. Didn't move. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. Around us, I shifted. Chairs creaked. A cough broke the tension, followed by another, more deliberate silence. People weren't sure if they had just witnessed an accident or a performance. I stood up. Thank you for your time, I said to the audience. We felt it was important to show something real. No one clapped. No one spoke. Lisa finally turned toward me. Her expression was somewhere between disbelief and unraveling. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her face had changed, not in form, but in texture. The practiced ease, the controlled elegance, gone. She looked, for the first time in years, like someone uncertain of her place in the room. I stepped down from the platform without waiting, left her sitting there in the half-light, surrounded by faces that once looked at her with admiration and now didn't know where to look at all. As I walked toward the exit, a voice from behind, someone I barely knew, said quietly, "That was something." I didn't reply, because it wasn't over yet. This was not the ending. It was the pause before the final move. The moment where the curtain hangs, just for a second, before the house lights return. Lisa had watched her own story play out, not the version she curated, but the one that had been unfolding beneath it all along. And she knew now, beyond all performance, beyond all permission, that I had seen everything. She didn't come home that night. Not surprising. After the video, after the room turned into a quiet sea of avoidance and stares, she had stayed in her seat too long, the way a person does when they still believe, on some level, that if they don't move, maybe the moment won't either. But the moment had passed, and I had already planned the rest. By morning, the house was clean. Nothing dramatic. I hadn't packed in a rage, hadn't slammed a single drawer. I had folded everything neatly. My keys were gone from the hook. The master closet sat lighter on my side. The photos, 2 in total, that used to sit by my nightstand were gone. Only hers remained. On the kitchen island, a sealed envelope waited. No note inside. Just a clean copy of the divorce filing. Signed, dated, and filed through the private firm I had retained months ago, long before the video. Alongside it, another envelope. This one addressed to the State Bar Association, with documentation attached, printed correspondence between Lisa and Carter, screenshots of messages exchanged through encrypted apps, calendar conflicts, ethics violations. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability. He had compromised multiple boundaries as a practicing mediator and nonprofit legal advisor. He would lose his certification. Quietly, perhaps, but permanently. I didn't need him to be humiliated. I needed him to be done. I left no message for Lisa. No final monologue. What could I say that hadn't already been shown? She had performed her part perfectly. She had walked into every frame, spoken every word, built the narrative I then held up to the light. I stayed with a colleague that weekend. Quiet apartment. Spare key. No questions. Just the dull hum of early morning city noise and the cold satisfaction of knowing that precision had done what emotion never could. By Monday, word had spread. Not loudly, not publicly, but in the way shame always travels. Sideways, through glances, half-sentences, careful silences. I received no texts. Lisa sent one, hours later. "You didn't have to do that. Not like that." I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. What did she expect? A dialogue? An apology for how I'd unwrapped her deception too elegantly? Her mistake wasn't in the affair. It wasn't even in the lie. It was in believing I was passive, in believing my silence meant weakness, that my patience meant blindness. She had built the stage and lit the lights. I simply gave her the mirror. Later that week, I heard Carter had quietly stepped away from 2 boards. A press release about restructuring priorities. His face no longer appeared on the seminar rosters. His social media presence muted. Not erased. Just faded, the way people do when they've been told not to be seen for a while. As for Lisa, she reached out once more. A voicemail, strained and cracked. I thought I was doing what I needed. I didn't expect this. Exactly. She hadn't expected anything. Not because I was unpredictable, but because I was consistent. Stable. Measured. She thought she could predict me because I never raised my voice, never asked questions I didn't already know the answers to. But what she forgot is that not asking is not the same as not knowing. I never needed noise to win. I needed only the truth. And when the truth was finally revealed, not by confrontation, but by design, it said everything I never had to.